So welcome back everybody, and we're gonna continue reviewing some games that was played. So in the last video we saw Ding, and we saw what type of games that Ding is capable of, and if he can bring that type of game over to the candidates, then Gukesh, he's obviously a very good player. He does have decent chances, but if that type of thing shows up, then yeah, it's not gonna be as easy for Gukesh to find to win a lot of the games that he might have won otherwise. So we're gonna be reviewing a game that Gukesh played, and I believe this was played between Gukesh and Ian Nepomniachtchi. I believe 2-time or 3-time world chess championship challenger, 2 times against Magnus, and 1 time against Ding, the reigning world champion Ding Liren. And this was played in January 18, 2024. And Gukesh Demoraju is white and Ian is black. So let's see how the game starts. Gukesh starts with D4, the London opening. This is a super solid line, and Ian doesn't want to commit any pawns, so he just develops the knight. The game can turn into pretty much a lot of variations. So he goes with C4, and Ian decides to play E6. He's gonna go for the, I believe, the French. He just develops the knight, and Ian decides to attack in the center. You always want to take control of the center, and he just defends and also attacks. He attacks that pawn right there. So this guy's being attacked, but it also has enough defenders. And it looks like this game, even though it came from in London, it's gonna get pretty open. So this is the Queen's Gambit declined, 3 knights. This is the Terrash variation. I don't know why it's called trash, but it's Terrash variation, right? Anyway, so he just takes, and a lot of pawns gets exchanged in the center, and he decides to take. And now there's a threat of, it's not really a threat, but yeah, it is a threat since this knight is pinned, so he's threatening to take. Well, I suppose you can also take with the queen, but then he's gonna take first, and then the queen is hanging, so this pawn is being threatened to be taken. So now it's defended at the moment. He just decides to be solid in the center by playing E3. Ian decides to castle, and Gukesh plays bishop to B5, disallowing this rook from developing into this nice semi-open file. So he just develops and attacks the queen. Gukesh moves the queen. So he just defends this knight. He was risking to damage the structure, and then the queen was gonna take back. So he also develops this rook onto this semi-open file, and makes it harder for this pawn to be pushed since there's so many defenders, including the queen. So, and I believe he's gonna try to develop the rook next. He's gonna attack the bishop first. Gukesh decides to trade the knight for the bishop, which is really interesting. He literally gives up the bishop here. Normally at this level, the bishop here is like an advantage. It's like a big advantage. So giving it up, you better know that what you're going to is okay, but I'm pretty sure he knows what he's doing. So he decides to take with the pawn. He didn't want to take with the bishop because he wants to take more central control. So immediately Gukesh wants to go for this bishop and also this pawn. So Ian doesn't even bother moving the bishop away because he was gonna lose this pawn and then this pawn next, and black's center would pretty much collapse and it might be game over. So he decides to castle, and now he moves it away because the pawn is no longer hanging, except for that one, the one on the a6 square. He decides to attack the bishop draws back, the queen is attacked. He's gonna try to put some pressure on this pawn and also decides what Gukesh wants to do with this queen. That is a little bit annoying. It's like into enemy territory, so you wanna kick it out. The queen goes all the way back to e2, and the knight moves in. This is a nice centralized knight. Obviously you can damage the structure, open it up. The queen will have to move, but black does have the bishop here. And to think about it, if he takes, I think the idea is not to take here, because, well, if he takes, he's not gonna, because it's pinned, he's gonna have to take this guy. Otherwise this will be a blunder. It's a good thing that this bishop is hanging. So he takes the bishop because the queen will be taken if he takes the knight, and just brings the bishop back. Now the game is balanced, but it might be a little bit easier with this side with the bishop, just because they're like snipers, long range pieces, you know, that kind of thing. And Gukesh consolidates on the second rank. He develops the bishop, the rook goes there, and the other rook goes putting some pressure on this pawn. As you can see, some pressure maybe, but at the moment these two pieces are defending it sufficiently, including the knight. The queen goes to f3 and the bishop drops back, and you don't want to be backward mated, so you always want to create some loft for your king, especially with rooks and queens still on the board. You just want to, h6 is multi-papers, and also nothing can go on the g3 square, because sometimes if there's a knight, the bishop goes there and pins the knight to the queen or to the rook or another hanging piece. So h3 is a pretty useful move. And so it looks like he's trying to maybe exchange this bishop for this knight, just because these pawns are really making this bishop's life not so great. They are on the same color, so he might try to take the knight. But before, he wants to know what Gukesh wants to do with the queen, so he attacks the queen. The queen goes there, and Ian decides to be solid and consolidate the f7 pawn. Gukesh takes on the initiative by playing knight to f4. He just rips the bishop back, and the queen goes all the way back. As you can see, Gukesh is 28 minutes versus 49 minutes. It looks like Ian might have won the opening battle a little bit, just because he's up on time. Even though the position is equal, nobody's losing yet, but he has more time with the bishop pair, so let's see what's gonna happen. So the bishop goes there, just taking more diagonals. The knight goes there, the bishop drops back. Now nobody's attacking this king at any time. That's what Ian is telling Gukesh. Even though he's a good player, these bishops are keeping this king pretty safe. Oops, I'm sorry. Let me try to find where I was at. Kinda skip there. Okay, we're there. So he plays b3. The bishop goes there, probably with the idea of going to this square and pinning that knight. So the knight moves, before it gets pinned. And now the idea is to probably push that pawn, and also maybe push that pawn also, open up the lines for those bishops. But at the moment it is possible, but he's telling him that rook, what are you gonna do about your rook? Gukesh, well, Ian decides to move the rook, and he plays rook to d1. I'm not too sure why. I guess he doesn't want any weird type of tactics with this undefended rook, so he just moves it to safety. And yes, even though he could have played c4 was very much possible. This pawn will be a little bit weak, so I think that's why he's delaying. So he decides to sack that knight. And what is the idea here? Obviously this can be taken two different ways, by this rook and by this rook. So what's the idea here? It looks like black just blundered. No, white just blundered. It might look like it, but he's gonna get some compensation, I believe. He's gonna win this pawn right here. So it's a piece sacrifice, but I think he's gonna go for some initiative. So the piece sacrifice has to be taken. He's gonna take the pawn. So even though white is literally down a piece, I guess black's king is so weak. Well, not so weak, but there's some back wake issues, and he's gonna try to exploit that. So he attacks the queen moves, tries to trade. After all, he's up a piece. So let's trade. Gukesh trades. Normally you don't want to trade when you've done a piece, but these two pawns might be a game changer. So he decides to take. Well, I guess Ian decides to give the piece back. I guess he didn't wanna deal with the headache of defending a position up a piece, so he decides to give it back. Because this rook is being attacked 1, 2, 3, and only being defended 1, 2. So he gave the piece back, which is really interesting. Okay, now everybody, the position is somewhat balanced. Well, not really, but the pieces are the same. So he gives a check, and that is why you always want to move that pawn, because that would have been checkmate if the pawn didn't move. And he decides to go there. The knight goes back, and he tries to attack the knight. And I presume you can just, for example, play queen there, or even you don't want to pin yourself with. It is possible, but why pin yourself? So either here or here. I prefer this square right there. You are defended by this. You also defend that, which defends this weak pawn, and etc. So the reason why white is winning is because of these two passed pawns. These pawns cancel out. They cancel out because of these extra pawns. That's why white is winning, even though white sacrificed a piece for it initially. Well, so he attacks the knight moves, he plays there, and you wanna push your passed pawns. You cannot take, even though it's hanging, because this is hanging. So he tries to move away so he can now take, and the pawn is pinned. You cannot take. Let's trade queens. I'm up 2 pawns and I just want to push him. And Ian is not gonna trade, obviously. He might try to go for some type of perpetual with playing to maybe like white there, and also maybe give some checks there and there. He might try to go for a draw. So that's an idea to watch out. So let's see what he does. So now if you go there, your bishop is hanging. So now you cannot try to go for a perpetual because your bishop is hanging. You're gonna have to try to move it. So he moves the bishop there. The bishop is hanging, but so is the knight. So if you take, I'm gonna take with check. I'm gonna take with check and some interest. So what is he gonna do? He decides to sack the knight. If I'm gonna lose the knight, I might as well take another pawn for it. So if he takes, he's gonna take. And black really cannot go for those ideas of perpetual. For one thing, the queen is here guarding the back wing, and also you can also centralize the queen right there guarding this critical square. And those ideas pretty much they go down the window, and all you gotta do is just push, maybe even like try to trade the queen somehow. You are up like a bunch of pawns, so this is completely winning. So in this position, Ian has had enough. With 53, Ian spent like barely an hour and decided to call it a day. And this is a game that was played by Gukesh. So obviously Gukesh is pretty much on form, you know. So Gukesh, I'm pretty sure he's gonna do okay. It just depends on what Ding is gonna bring on the table. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm gonna try to put up some more content in the future, and if you did, well, be sure to like, subscribe, and maybe even share. And I'll see you guys later. You guys have a nice day.